Right. So welcome back to another episode of Chat Friday. So in today's episode, we're going to take a look at TKD TEKKERS video, which is from the 2019 European Championships. It's the final of the minus 70 senior male division, and that's between Iain O Hare from Scotland and Hong Keat Looi from Ireland. So this is a very interesting match. Some good level guys who have been in the top finals before and things like that in the minus 70 division. So it's a good battle, and it's worth taking a look at some of the interesting points and maybe taking a couple of principles and concepts from this match.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning in this one as well that we had Hong in this one in his 10th European Championships, not his 10th final, but his 10th European Championships. And obviously he considered retiring a couple of times before that, but the opportunity to have 10 Worlds and 10 European Championships kind of enticed him back into it. And obviously we had to tell him to retire afterwards, because you can't do any better than winning on the way out the door. So let's have a look at how the match transpired.
Next category running 5. Senior female sparring up to 68. Senior female sparring up to 68. Come to ring 5.
So yeah, it was a fairly good first round out of Hong there, and Iain facing a 4-0 deficit going into halftime. It's definitely not what any of us as kind of casual spectators would have expected coming out of that first round.
Yeah, electric start from Hong, to be fair. And I think, he kind of almost caught Iain on the hop a little bit, that Iain maybe expected it to come a little bit different. And maybe, I think this is something that's quite common actually when people fight Hong. The fact that he's been around so long, the fact that he trains in different styles, including points fighting, and things like that. He has his own unique combination, even leading off with back leg turning kicks and stuff like that. So somebody who comes at you like that, it takes a little bit of time to kind of get into the rhythm and the flow of it, especially when Iain has gone through a couple of rounds with, I think he fought a lot of guys who would be quite young on the way to that final. So I think it was a little bit of a switch up there in terms of matchup for him, and it maybe took a little bit of time where Hong took the initiative on himself to kind of go and play his own game from the start.
Yeah, it's very hard to know if, in Ian's preparation, would he have been watching Hong, or would Hong be one of the guys that he would kind of have, okay, I'll look at that if I have to, but I'll focus on, Kamil Dobrovolsky or, whoever else that, the people that you might have expected to see around the finals at that stage. We always knew Hong was capable, but I don't think even from the Irish point of view, any of us hugely expected Hong to be in the final. I think he did surprise us to some degree.
He always does really well at -70, because I can remember even back there in the Budapest 2016 World Cup, I think he got a bronze medal in that division as well, whereas when he was fighting at 78 he wasn't as successful. I don't think that division really suited him and his style in particular, but he was always thereabouts when he was fighting -70.
Yeah, for sure. We have a few clips pulled together here where I think it really just reflects Hong committing. Once he's made his decision, he's going to go into an attack, and he commits with it. And you can see where he's following a whole range of techniques and just getting into the mix. And I think it's getting him a lot in this match in terms of his, in terms of getting into the hands, getting a follow on, getting a finish, just that continuation side of things, and he follows virtually everything in.
Yeah, and you know what, that we spoke already, that's something that we've almost seen in every single episode that we've covered here, of continuation scores and momentum being a massive part, and it seems to be getting really rewarded lately by the judges. And also I think it's worth mentioning that I think at this point in Hong's career, and like you said, like 10 European Championships, he's been around for such a long time, I think he's coming into this almost, I don't want to say not caring, but he almost has, it's hard to kind of articulate it, but he's coming in with less worries and less expectations on his shoulders, as opposed to Iain, I think, where Iain maybe feeling a little bit of pressure, and this is a do or die situation, where I think Hong might be coming in here a little bit carefree. And I think that really shows, and at the start where he's coming in and it's just his game and he's going doing what he's going doing, and it doesn't matter if Iain is there, he's going through him, and it doesn't matter if he hits him with a defensive shot, he's just going doing what he's going to do, and that's it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah,
and it does put Iain under a certain pressure there. By the time of some of these defensive shots are coming in, he is on the back foot, he is conceding ring space, and in some cases there, as he's travelling, as he's exiting, and what that is doing for him is it's making it very difficult for the referees to see the shots and award the scores, because as we've said before, not every score is equal under all circumstances. A side kick to the hip as the person stretches towards you it's lovely and clear, and 2 or 3 judges will see it, but like a retreating side kick from the edge of the ring as you travel out of the ring is one of those things where you might get it on one scorecard, and that might be all you get. Where if your opponent initiated the attack and had the momentum going forward, and they're landing a punch or two, even if they only get one of them, it's probably seen on 3 cards or 4 cards. So I think Hong is getting a little more reward out of his scoring here. But the big thing for me is that momentum. He's taking up ring space.
Yeah, he's covering big mat space as well there, like as he initiates, because a lot of the time Iain is getting shots off, but he's maybe leaving the ring, or he's in a position in the corner where it's difficult to see, just falling there like we've seen. So like that continuation from Hong and that continuous pressure is actually very, very useful for him, because it stops Iain getting any real return from the judges, even though he is doing pretty well and he's able to get off some nice shots. He's not getting any reward, and you know what, that's pure Hong style, where I've seen it go the other way for him at times as well. I remember him fighting Artem Belov and people like this, where it was a very similar type match, but it's just it can be 50-50 in terms of the judges, and that's just Hong's style. He leaves it all out there, but it went on his favour on this day.
Well, that's it. Hong will have a look at an exchange, look back at the scoreboard, okay, I need to do more, and he'll go and do more, and I think that's the way he'll tend to look at it. I've just thrown up there the halftime scoreboard, and you can see as they're heading away for the brief chat with the coaches, Iain's already got 4 warnings. So as far as this round goes, he's already taken a point from exits, and I would have to say for watching Iain over the years, he's not a guy who exits much.
He's usually the guy that's on the front foot, to be fair. Anytime that I've seen him, he's usually the guy pushing the pace and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting to I don't know whether that's a combination of maybe having a little bit of respect for Hong, knowing that he's been around for such a long. Yeah, so I don't know, is that a mixture of him giving a little bit too much respect to Hong, and a combination of that as well as maybe being a little bit tricky with that new style that we talked about as an earlier point. So I think that might be a combination of a slower start for me, and maybe he had a game plan originally that was going to be to counter Hong, but there's so much to be said in these short rounds of 2 minutes to go with your own game plan and just commit to your game and not really worry about the other person too much.
So maybe let's have a look at the the second round, and after the second round we can come back and maybe imagine what the coach might have said at that halftime break. I think it's Katja Hansen there for Iain. What might actually have been said in that moment, when you're coming back at halftime, and how you're going to go and tackle the final. So let's have a look at this second round.
Next category, Division 2, Senior Female Sparring up to 56. Female Senior up to 56 come to Division 2.
Okay, and there we have it. So lovely sense of occasion for Hong, I suppose, at that stage, but it was definitely devastating for Iain when you look at the scoreboard between the halftime and the end. He was really fighting uphill against the warnings and fouls that he accumulated. I mean, I think we got it there. I'm not sure on the warnings. I couldn't quite make it out at the end. I need to go back and count it, but I think he was at least 4 points down, and if not 5, between the 2 fouls and the collection of warnings. And I mean, when it's a final, that's just insurmountable, really.
We've highlighted this so many times recently, and I think it's something that people haven't actually taken into consideration, the impact the warnings have on such a close contest. But when you think about it, if you were told that you're going to be starting off in a final minus 4 points on all 4 cards, that's a very difficult task in a final. Obviously, it's going to be a competitor that's quite a good level to compare with you. So that task in itself is massive. Like, one headshot is not even enough there. So it's very difficult.
And I think one of the things that let it develop to that stage was Iain not fighting his regular style or his regular game plan. And I think Iain is usually, when I think of Iain, I think of a guy that, you know, usually quite strong off the front leg, wants to be high tempo and forward for the majority of the match, does tend to impose his tempo and his pace on the match. And I think one of the things that Hong did very, very well in this one was to change that, was to take the tempo away from Iain and make him reach, make him go over, you know, longer distances to get to him. And I think what it did for Hong in this case in particular was it meant when he was pushing in and he was attacking Iain, he wasn't attacking Iain steady, balanced on both feet and able to respond well with hands. He was attacking Iain overcommitted, you know, to where he was then having to retreat and a little bit off balance or square. And I think what that did for him was massive in terms of being able to like really up the control of the tempo that Hong had.
Yeah, well, we seen at the very beginning of the match, Iain starts off the front foot, and you see him testing like head level and things like that with the high section turning kick, and that kind of never really followed after that first round, to be honest. And I think it's something that could have got him a little bit of momentum going, if he was able to do so. As you said, it's his game, and I think there's a valuable lesson there for anybody to learn from that. Like no matter whether you have a particular game plan for anybody or not, it's so valuable to be able to just hone in on your own style and your own how you spar, really. And I think if you can bring that to any match, that's going to be just as important as anything else. Yeah.
So we have just a little bit of kind of a clip of Hong using this kind of retreating style a little bit. So he's backing away and pulling Iain towards him. And we can see it puts Iain at an uncomfortable distance from time to time. And okay, yeah, you can see the couple of downward kicks and so on. But I think the concept is just, normally you'd expect Hong to be that, you know, forward, foot in the gas, you know, throwing shots at you as it ends up being afterwards. But his style here, which isn't normal for Hong, I think, in general, of just pulling and making that little bit of space in front of Iain that Iain has to deal with or go into, I think it messes up the tempo, because you can't fight at a high tempo when you're chasing your opponent in that way. You have to commit, like, are you going to pick up your leg and carry it across that distance and risk the other person just stepping off the line or circling away from you and leaving you, like, putting in all of that energy for no reward. And it means, I think, that Hong has been able to start an awful lot of the time following his front foot in, or just following, you know, on someone being a little bit off, or Iain being a bit off balance. And over the full 2 rounds, it's meant 7 or 8 warnings.
Yeah. If you just go through that whole clip again and you watch every single sequence, you notice that Hong never takes more than one full mat back. He's retreating to just lure Iain in, I feel. So it's not a case where he's trying to relieve any pressure. It's actually the opposite, where he's trying to give a little bit of a pull to push back. And I think that's a very notable thing to take into consideration there, that he's almost baiting Iain into his own rhythm again. And it's one of the things that we talked about before, of having control of the distance, the ring position, and things like that. So he's actually given Iain a little bit of control to take it back instantly, to put it back into Hong's perspective again. And I think that's kind of one of the major lessons of this contest in particular, that Hong took complete control of this match, I think.
And maybe that is that, you know, maybe there's a benefit to competing for, you know, 20 years and or 20 plus years, and, you know, seeing evolution of styles and fighters over time. You know, you can just approach a match that little bit differently, or you can approach each match a little bit differently. And maybe that was just the exact thing that you needed for Iain on that particular day. And I'm 100% sure if these guys fight this match again, it doesn't go the same way.
Exactly,
you know?
But that's it. Like the styles is what makes the fight, and the fact that this style was able to be imposed is just how it was on that day. I mean, even if you didn't go to another day, if this went to a 3rd round and a 4th round, I imagine that Iain would eventually come into his own and bring his own game into the forefront. But I think, like, even if you turned off the scoreboard here and there was no scoreboard visual, like, you would have said that this was a pretty close match.
Yeah.
If there was no scoreboard, because like there was a lot of back and forth. Iain was able to get off his own exchanges as well, even though mostly in a counter fashion.
Yeah.
So it was a great contest, but it's just that the scoreboard in the end kind of made it look as if it was a little bit more dominant than maybe it was.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing where, you know, Hong has won the first round, Iain has probably won the second round, but the warnings and the minus points preserve the difference, you know, across the 2 rounds. So yeah, I suppose the thing is, there's a message or a little bit of a lesson in there as well, in terms of, well, how do you respond to being 4-0 down in the final of European Championships, walking back to your coach, and how does the coach respond to you being 4-0 down? So what's the message that they can give you about that? Like, what, you know, what's your thoughts if you're if Juliana or someone is walking back to you and that's the scoreboard? What are you saying to them before you send them back in?
Yeah, so what I would be looking at there is to take a little bit back control of one of the things in particular. I'd be looking to get control of the distance or the ring position as soon as possible, and try not to leave that up, because I think that was kind of the start of Hong accumulating a little bit of scores and some little bit of momentum on Iain. So if he was able to start off that second round at maybe a little bit of a higher tempo, I think it would have made a massive difference, because he started off in the first round really, really well and positive. So like in the first maybe exchange or two, he was looking pretty sharp, and then I think Hong just kind of took over from there. So you really need to have a little bit of control of the distance and the ring position if you want to have any momentum or pressure building up for you to get those scores back. Especially in this ring, I imagine, like, it was evident that even though Iain was getting off some exchanges in terms of like defensive side kicks and techniques on the retreat, he wasn't being rewarded for them on the scoreboard. And so you need to see a little bit of a change there, because as we mentioned, these rounds are so short that if you continue with the same plan and you're not seeing any results on the scoreboard, it's not going to go your way. So you need to make an adjustment there, absolutely.
Yeah, and it can be a challenging thing when that plan has got you to the final. It's worked.
Yeah.
You know, there's been nothing wrong with the plan, but potentially you fought all of your rounds in another ring in front of a different set of judges. So, you know, what was effective for you isn't working in the first minute. You have to make those snap decisions. Okay, we're going to a different plan, or we're going to change it. And it's difficult when you've got, you know, when it's for all the apples, you know. It is a final after all, and you know you're that close to winning it, and it's very hard to at that point go, well, the plan that's worked all along isn't a good plan anymore, let me have another plan. And it's very hard for your coach to call that too. So, you know, you'd always kind of feel for a competitor who finds themselves in that position. But
I think as well, it's interesting to note that there's a difference between 4-0 and being 4 points behind. Like, for example, because you might be 4-0 down,
and a point,
but it might be only 1 point on each score. So like there is a big difference between 4-0 down versus being 4 points behind.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I think in the first round there, Iain was like 3 points, 4 points behind on 2 cards, and there was like 1 score on the other ones. So like he could have easily easily pulled back 2 of those cards early on in the second round, and it could have been a completely different match, because who knows how both fighters would have adjusted and reacted if it was 2-2.
I often find that it's an interesting situation that you end up in, where, you know, when you go back into a match and the goal is, okay, listen, you're fighting for round 3 here, because if you 2 cards are gone, but if you bring back these other 2 cards, you're ready to go. Now mentally, your fighter's gone in there planning to fight 2 more rounds. Their job is to bring it to 2-2, and when the hands come up in the middle at the end of that round, they're back in. They were ready to fight round 3, whereas the other person has come in there mentally with a 4-0 lead. They're looking to hold on to that 4-0 lead. They're expecting to finish the match in 2 minutes. And mentally, what it can do to you is the person who's now got the momentum, because they've pulled back, they've gotten those 2 cards, they're into the 3rd round already expecting to fight a 3rd round. And that mentally can be all it takes to carry you through, you know, the rest of the way. So, you know, I think it's a very interesting concept, because if you think about it, the people who are competing in team sparring quite often will probably have this idea ingrained in them. Like, this is one of the things that I notice because of team sparring quite often. But if you don't team spar that much, it's probably not something that you even think of or consider. You know what I mean? Because you're not really fighting for flags and individual scores, so individual corner judges, we say. And so it's an interesting thing that some people may not notice. But like, you don't need to win 4-0 or 3-0 in every single match. You know, if you can win 2-1, that's all you need. We'll take it.
A win is a win.
We'll take it.
So it's a little bit different that way. So once you understand that maybe not all cards are available at halftime, but if you can just start by focusing on 2 and try to claw back those 2, I think that's a great start for anybody who's behind.
Yeah, super. So we'll leave it there for this week, and I think,
so, any takeaways from that? Any lessons from this match?
yeah, for me, like, it's the act, don't react kind of thing. And I mean, I know it's one that we tell the kids the whole time, but you are so much better being the one that is taking the action and forcing your opponent to react to your choices in almost all scenarios. And I think that's definitely something that we're seeing. You know, we're seeing less out and out counter fighters who can who wait and wait and wait. And I think, you know, being more positive in your mindset as well, taking the action puts you in a more positive place mentally.
Definitely, and I think that's probably something that people take from like all these boxing and MMA promos where people are game planning for a particular opponent. We have to remember that we're competing in a tournament series here, so you fight lots of different people. So I think there's a lot to be said for coming out with your own style and imposing that on anybody you face against, you know.
Yeah, and it's just figure out how to line up your strengths with their weaknesses and go from there.
Exactly.
Cool.
Absolutely. So yeah, another great one in the bank again. So if anybody has some more ideas for any more episodes, so if you want to see a different style, maybe a different format or anything like that, just leave us know. Pop us a message on any of the social media platforms, or of course drop a message into the comment box on YouTube below.
Brilliant. We'll catch you next week.